Well, all this sounds impressive. So to find out more about what's driving investor interest in Alibaba, I'm joined by Jeffrey Halley, Senior Market Analyst at currency trading firm OANDA. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you.
So let's start by talking us through these secondary listings and what would make Alibaba go down that particular path at this point in time.
There's a number of reasons why companies may wish to do secondary listings, but I think in Alibaba's case, Hong Kong makes complete sense for the time zone. Their shares are listed as ADRs over in the United States. By being listed in Hong Kong as well, investors can trade those shares 24 hours a day. They're also coming closer to home with mainland China and also making their shares more accessible to both Hong Kong and mainland investors, as well as regional investors who may not be as comfortable dealing in the ADR market in the United States. So there's a bunch of reasons, all of them good for why Alibaba is doing this secondary listing. But what they don't actually really need is the money.
Clearly. Now, we know that this IPO went ahead despite the unrest that's going on in Hong Kong. So what does all this do in terms of instilling confidence in the Hong Kong market there?
I think this is a huge boost for the Hong Kong market. And I'm sure this is why Alibaba is one of the reasons it's pushed on despite the troubles that have occurred there over the last 6 months. So I believe that Hong Kong will continue to be mainland China's financial gateway to the world, and the fact that Alibaba has chosen to list here, to list in Hong Kong, is certainly a vote of confidence in that fact. So I think it's good news all around. Whether it has much impact on the other issues happening in Hong Kong at the moment, I'm not sure, but for financial markets, which have taken a bit of a beating there over the last 6 months, this is good news.
Now let's look at the size of the IPO. Estimates of around $25 billion. What does that do in terms of, what does that tell us about investor confidence in Alibaba itself?
I think there's a huge amount of investor confidence in Alibaba. Its performance has been outstanding since it listed its ADRs in the United States those 5 years ago, which seems like a lifetime away now. They did temper the IPO by halving it. I think that was to ensure that the demand was sufficient, and while the protests were going on in Hong Kong, the demand was sufficient from investors to get that IPO away. As it happens, and we're all experts in hindsight, they could have done 25 billion and easily filled that whole subscription, because the subscription itself at 11 billion was massively oversubscribed a number of times.
So how would you say this IPO compares to some of the others this year?
Well, it's easily the biggest IPO of the year. I believe Uber raised somewhere around $9 billion, and then InBev floated their Asian beer unit for $5 billion on Hong Kong earlier this year, which wasn't particularly well received. Uber, we know what's happened there, so this is easily the largest IPO of the year. It will probably be eclipsed next month by the Saudi Aramco IPO, but that will only be listed on the Riyadh Stock Exchange, so it won't necessarily be widely available to global investors. The big difference here with Alibaba is being listed in the States, but also particularly in Hong Kong, and those two are fungible, so you can actually buy on one and sell on the other with Alibaba now. It's accessible to the entire world now if they wish to add Alibaba shares to their investment portfolios.
And we did see a strong start for Alibaba when it did list in New York, and now a strong start in Hong Kong as well. How do you see Alibaba performing in both places in the mid to longer term?
I think a lot of this is going to come down, Rachelle, to the trade relations between China and the United States, and we're probably all sick and tired of talking about it now after so many months, but really it will remain the key macroeconomic factor for both this year and next year as to the trajectory of the world economy. I think that Alibaba's future is bright. I thought it was bright when it first listed 5 years ago, and it's not proved me wrong at all. But we're seeing a rise in protectionism and populism around the world now, and the threat of trade barriers has never really been higher. So I think its future is bright, but the proviso is that we need to get through particularly this trade dispute with the United States and China, preferably in the first half of next year.
All right, thank you. Jeffrey Halley there, Senior Market Analyst at OANDA.